It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. When the guns finally fell silent on the 11th hour of the 11th day of November, 1918, the world let out a collective breath. The trenches were emptied, the dead were buried, and humanity promised itself that such madness would never happen again. But that promise was built on a foundation of sand. In the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the victors did not just defeat Germany. They humiliated it. They stripped it of its land, its military, and its dignity, forcing a proud nation to its knees under the weight of impossible debt and national shame. While the diplomats in Paris toasted to peace, they were unknowingly sowing the seeds of a catastrophe far greater than the one they had just survived. In the beer halls of Munich and the streets of Berlin, a new and terrifying anger was brewing, waiting for a voice to give it direction. 20 years is a long time in the life of a man, but it is a blink of an eye in history. In just 2 decades, the children who were born into the silence of 1918 would come of age just in time to be fed into the meat grinder of 1939. The peace was not a peace at all. It was merely a 20-year armistice. And as the summer of 1939 began to fade, the sun was setting on the old world. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. On the 1st of September, 1939, the sky over Poland turned black. It did not begin with a declaration of war delivered by a diplomat in a suit. It began with the scream of the Jericho trumpet. This was the siren attached to the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber, a sound designed specifically to liquefy the bowels of anyone on the ground. At 4:45 in the morning, the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte. Simultaneously, 1.5 million German soldiers surged across the border. The world had seen war before, but it had never seen this. This was not the slow, grinding trench warfare of the past. This was Blitzkrieg lightning war. It was a terrifying symphony of speed and violence. Panzer tanks punched holes through enemy lines, motorized infantry flooded through the gaps, and the Luftwaffe dominated the skies, destroying the Polish Air Force before many planes could even leave the ground. The Polish army fought with desperate, suicidal bravery, but they were fighting a 20th century war with 19th century tactics. Stories circulated of Polish cavalry charging against German tanks. A myth perhaps, but one that symbolized the tragic disparity of the conflict. Britain and France, bound by treaties to protect Poland, issued an ultimatum to Berlin: withdraw or face war. Hitler ignored them. On September 3rd, the world was at war again. But for Poland, help would not come. In the east, the Soviet Union, acting on a secret pact with Hitler, invaded from the rear. Trapped between 2 totalitarian giants, Poland ceased to exist as a sovereign nation in less than a month. The darkness had swallowed its first victim. Following the fall of Poland, a strange and unsettling silence settled over the Western Front. The French troops sat behind their Maginot Line, a massive, impregnable chain of fortifications along the German border, believing that defense was the key to victory. The British Expeditionary Force dug in alongside them. For 8 months, there were no major battles, no grand offensives. The press called it the phony war. It was a surreal period where soldiers played cards, wrote letters home, and waited. But on the other side of the line, the German war machine was not sleeping. It was coiling like a spring. Hitler and his generals knew that attacking the Maginot Line head-on was suicide. Instead, they looked north. In April 1940, the phony war ended abruptly. Germany launched a rapid invasion of Denmark and Norway to secure iron ore supplies and naval bases. Denmark fell in 6 hours. Norway fought hard but succumbed after 2 months. The illusion of safety in the West was shattered, but the main blow was yet to land. On the 10th of May 1940, the hammer fell. German forces invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The Allies rushed their best troops north into Belgium, expecting a repeat of 1914. They believed this was the main attack. They were wrong. It was a trap of historic proportions. While the Allies were distracted in the north, a massive column of German armor was snaking its way through the Ardennes forest. The French commanders had dismissed the Ardennes as impassable for tanks, leaving it lightly defended by reserve troops. It was a fatal miscalculation. German panzers burst out of the forest and crossed the Meuse River, smashing through the weak French defenses. They were now behind the main Allied armies. It was the Manstein Plan in action, a sickle cut that severed the Allied supply lines. The German advance was so fast that even Hitler was nervous, fearing a counterattack that never came. General Erwin Rommel's 7th Panzer Division moved with such speed it was nicknamed the Ghost Division, because neither the enemy nor the German High Command knew exactly where it was. The collapse of the Allied defense was absolute. The Netherlands surrendered in 5 days after the brutal bombing of Rotterdam. Belgium surrendered soon after. The British Expeditionary Force and the best French armies were trapped with their backs to the sea at a small port town called Dunkirk. It seemed that the war was lost. The entire British army faced annihilation or capture. But then, a miracle happened. Whether due to a German halt order to regroup or sheer desperation, a window of opportunity opened. Under the cover of the Royal Air Force, a flotilla of 800 civilian boats, fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, lifeboats, sailed from England to rescue the soldiers. Over 9 days, in an operation that defied all logic, 338,000 men were evacuated. They left their tanks and heavy guns behind, but the army survived. They lived to fight another day. But France was doomed. The Germans turned south, rolling toward Paris. The French army, once considered the finest in Europe, had been psychologically and physically broken. The government fled the capital. On the 14th of June, German troops marched down the Champs-Élysées. The swastika flew over the Eiffel Tower. It was a humiliation so deep it would scar the French soul for generations. Hitler insisted that the French surrender be signed in the very same railway carriage in Compiègne where Germany had been forced to sign the armistice in 1918. He sat in the same chair, forcing the French to taste the same bitterness Germany had swallowed 2 decades earlier. With France occupied, the continent of Europe was dark. Only one light remained flickering across the Channel. Great Britain stood alone. Hitler expected Britain to sue for peace. He had no desire to fight the British Empire. He admired it. He expected logic to prevail in London. But he had not counted on Winston Churchill. The new British Prime Minister, a man with a bulldog spirit and a lifetime of preparing for this moment, refused to bow. He rallied his people with speeches that turned the English language into a weapon of war. He promised them nothing but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Realizing that Britain would not surrender, Hitler ordered the preparation for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. But before an invasion fleet could cross the Channel, Germany needed to destroy the Royal Air Force. The Battle of Britain began in the summer of 1940. It was the first major military campaign fought entirely by air forces. Day after day, the skies over southern England were filled with the contrails of dogfights. The German Luftwaffe, led by Hermann Göring, had more planes and more pilots. They attacked British shipping, airfields, and radar stations. The British pilots, the few, flew their Hurricanes and Spitfires to the point of exhaustion. They would land, refuel, rearm, and take off again, sometimes flying 5 sorties a day. The British had a secret weapon, radar. This technology allowed them to see the German formations forming up over France, letting them scramble their fighters exactly when and where they were needed. Despite this, the RAF was on the breaking point. Airfields were burning, pilots were dying, and the defense was crumbling. Then, a mistake changed the course of history. A German bomber, off course in the night, accidentally dropped bombs on London. In retaliation, Churchill ordered a bombing raid on Berlin. The damage to the German capital was minimal, but the psychological blow to Hitler was massive. Enraged, he ordered the Luftwaffe to switch targets. Instead of attacking the airfields and radar stations that were crippling them, they would attack London. The Blitz began. For 57 consecutive nights, London was bombed. Entire neighborhoods were turned to rubble. Thousands of civilians died. But this tactical shift gave the Royal Air Force the one thing they desperately needed: time. While London burned, the airfields were repaired, and new pilots were trained. The Luftwaffe bled its strength away against the resilience of the British cities. By September, it was clear that Germany could not gain air superiority. Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely. Britain had survived. As 1940 turned into 1941, the war had become a global conflict. Mussolini, the Italian dictator and Hitler's ally, tried to expand his own empire in Africa and the Balkans but failed miserably, forcing Hitler to send German troops to bail him out. The war spread to the burning sands of North Africa and the mountains of Greece. But in the back of Hitler's mind, the war in the West was merely a distraction. His true obsession, the ideological enemy he had hated since his days in Vienna, lay to the east. He looked at the vast expanses of the Soviet Union, at the wheat fields of Ukraine and the oil fields of the Caucasus, and saw the Lebensraum, living space, he had promised the German people. He believed the Red Army was weak, a rotting structure that would collapse with one kick. He began to mass millions of men on the eastern border, preparing to break the pact he had signed with Stalin. The world had seen horror in Poland and France, but it had seen nothing yet. The true war, the war of annihilation, was about to begin. The fire that had started in Europe was about to consume the